Hey, it's me, Tim, and one of my goals for 2022 was to get into making more acoustic instruments. And I've just been so busy now. Here it is, the year's almost over, and I'm just now getting started on this thing. So if you've watched my channel in the past, you've seen I've made some acoustic instruments, and I've also had some that I have made off camera, experimenting with shapes and processes and whatnot. And that's basically because that's me. I don't do things the way they're done. I'm just going to buy a book and follow them. I've always got to do things the hard way, you know. So I've had some success and some failures in the past doing this, and I wanted to really sort of dial in and make a system and chase down some of these dragons that I've been chasing. Because of course, you know, I'm working with reclaimed and you know, thrown away materials and whatnot. Where with electric guitars, I can get away with a lot more because so much of the sound is coming from the electronics and whatnot. And the tone wood isn't really an issue, but with acoustic guitars, it is very much an integral part of the sound. So you know, there's a lot to do, a lot to learn, a lot of mistakes to make, and I guess this is going to be like the beginning of a series. So the first thing I wanted to do was to make a proper mold. In the past, I just sort of made some sloppy jigs and whatnot. I wanted to make a proper mold for bending the sides and putting that together, and so we're going to start that right now. Originally, my plan to make the molds was just to buy some new MDF, but then my buddy Louis Van Aken came by for a visit, and he gave me this stack of shelves that he pulled out of some piece of furniture that he was upcycling or something, and they're all made of some pretty nice 3/4-inch plywood, and I thought, you know, since I had them and they were free, I'd use those instead. And so what I did here is I used my Avid CNC, and of course I designed in my Vectric software to make a whole bunch of these layers that I'm going to stack up together and make my mold. And I used an 1/8-inch end mill to do the cutting, which is a little bit small for this kind of work, but my theory was that the sidewall of the instrument would be about 1/8 of an inch, and so this way if I cut right on the line, or inside the line rather, of my mold, the gap between the piece that I'm cutting out, like the waist, and the outside of the thing would be exactly the same width, so now there's no waste at all. I can use both pieces and they'll mesh up perfectly with the material in between them. As you can see here, I'm stacking them all up to get ready to glue them. And you'll notice though that I didn't just do that, I actually cut that shape out again a little bit smaller. I'll explain that in a minute. And then I also had to cut out a part for the tail block and heel, like neck block as well. You saw earlier that I just used these plastic nails from a nail gun to just knock everything onto the wasteboard, and I can cut right through it with my CNC without having to worry about damaging anything. And that worked good for the big pieces, so I didn't have to put any tabs. But for these little pieces, it made more sense to tab them since there were so many, and then just clean the tabs up on my router table. I also CNC'd in some alignment holes so I could then put some of these pieces together, just using some common dowels. And you'll notice there that I'm using liquid nails instead of wood glue, and that's because there's some finish on these pieces and the wood glue wouldn't work properly, whereas the liquid nails will stick a little bit better. I didn't want to sand all the finish off and glue them and clamp them all properly, so I just did this, got them together pretty straight, and then if there were any spots that looked a little loose, I just ran a sheetrock screw through there, and that was enough to hold it. I need to flush up this edge. See, I have these molds here. Now you might be asking yourself, why did he cut these pieces out of the middle instead of just running this line? So I specifically used an 1/8-inch end mill, so this edge would fit because my material is going to be about 1/8 of an inch, and that's how much of a gap I want. But I thought, since I had this space, I could see myself having a full frame interior become useful for some of the steps, and having other thicknesses, like, because this thickness matches this, but I might want to do something thinner, so I figured this would be a way I could just kind of use this waist as other forms of clamping if I need them. So right now they're all loose, I can screw a couple together if I need to or not. But so I have my bulk of my molds here that I need to, I don't know, I made these too tall by accident. And you know, I got to sand these up and just get these edges to fit, and then I will use this rod to, this is my first thought at least, I can always just take squeeze clamps, because you can flip the head around. Whatever, we can talk about that later. The easiest way to square up those inner joints where the two molds need to meet was to straighten up the outer edge and then use that edge on my table saw to make sure I could transfer the straight line down, because it was all pretty much exact, but you know, there's a 1/16 of an inch here or there, and so I just wanted to make sure it was all going to seal up nice. I needed to put some latches on the mold so I could cinch the two pieces together, and otherwise they'd just, fly apart when I tried to put pressure on the inside. I'll just jump out of the timeline real quick and show you that I ended up taking these latches off the top and putting them on the side because I didn't really think about it, but it only took me a second to figure it out. If they were there, I wouldn't be able to do that. And also, the mold would sort of potato chip up because it was only clamped on one side. So you have to put them on both sides, and then neither side could lay flat. So that's why we just put them on this side, and it does the job just fine. The mold works both ways. Back to before I made that fix, you can see I have those clamps on the top, which are doing me no good, and I had to find the center of my tail block and head block there, as well as line up some holes in the sides to put my threaded rods through and make these clamps work. Use my center square there. Comes in handy a lot. Center square at squaretools.com. And, drilled out some holes and set this all up. Pretty basic stuff. I drilled a slightly larger than 5/16 inch hole for the rod, and then I also put a larger hole so I could get a nut and get a tool in there to tighten it. And then I use these through handles to add the pressure. Now, since these are in the center of these thinner blocks, and these are thicker and I centered them, this rod goes right above those rods, so I can actually put all of these molds in at the same time. It's like the most professional looking thing I've done in a long time. Woo! Now here, of course, is where I fix the latches, and you can kind of see how the whole thing comes apart and goes together pretty well. Now I'm getting ready to try out the mold, and I'm not sure if it's going to work or not yet. I used the fabric tape measure to get the exact inside dimensions, circumference I guess you would call it, to figure out how long my sides needed to be, and I started to experiment. Now, of course, I want to make my sides with closet doors, which I can't steam bend because they're all glued up of multiple layers of plywood. So instead what I do is I laser kerf them, which I've done successfully before. You can watch my drum kit video or the very first acoustic guitar video I made to sort of get a better understanding of what's happening. But what I'm doing is I'm scoring the wood a gazillion times with the laser, not cutting it all the way through. And it makes it like wacky wood, just like any kind of kerfed wood that you would buy. Here you can see coming right out of the laser that this stuff is ready to bend. What I did for my first attempt is I just measured the two sides and I tried to put it together like that. But then what I realized is that that's not the best way, because now up at the headstock I have two spots I have to seam it, one where it bends like almost a full 90 degrees. And I was just having trouble in that cutaway area in general. You can see I pieced together a couple parts there to kind of figure out what was going to work best. I made some other mistakes too. I reached into my wood supply to look for some cutoffs that I could use to make my tail block and neck block, and this piece of poplar looked like it was going to work perfectly. I glued those pieces together and got ready to see if I could make a side that worked. I'm still not sure if this is going to work out or not. I admit that I just bought the kerfing instead of trying to make it myself. It just seemed like it was going to be too tedious and time consuming, and the expense of this wasn't bad. So I glued it up using some spring clamps, and I kind of was learning the best approach and practices. And another thing that I felt like I did wrong is I feel like I should have done the top first and a couple other little things like that, of just how I could do it better in the future. And some other discrepancies I noticed in sort of my math and stuff. But like I said, this is sort of a practice, so I wasn't too worried about it yet. And then I also noticed some stuff about my mold that I can make better. I made this center mold just a little too thick, so I couldn't put it in when I had put the bottom bracing in. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm learning as I go. I need to chip away, either just take one layer off or just cut away, so I can use this one when I do the flip side. But remember, I saved all those pieces. I just cut the rails off and just clamped these in here, and they fit perfectly. And since I've already got a little bit of bracing, everything's a little stiffer. So I think that's going to work pretty well. What I was trying to explain is that you can see how there's that 5/8 inch kerfing going across the bottom. Now my block, I had to put it those center supports that I created would have to go above that, and then they went up too high for me to glue the bottom curving on. So I'm just going to cut away some material from the top layer of that, and then I'll be able to have it sit over the curving when it's upside down. Does that make sense? I should have made this part on this piece, so I'm going to add 1.25 inches to that, and then we'll only have 2 splits that we'll have to deal with instead of 1. Jumping out of the timeline into the future again, these are another set of sides that I had cut that I hadn't used yet. I didn't make that correction of adding 1.25 inches, but you can see I just sort of off-centered it at the tail block and put them in, and I didn't crush it as hard to keep that cutaway horn a little softer, and so now I've just got that one seam to take care of in the perfect spot, and this is going to work a lot better, but that's going to be later. We haven't finished the one I screwed up yet. After gluing the tail block and neck block in, I was able to just sort of roughly sand the sides down a little bit, but by this point I was kind of thinking I was going to try this again and start that one that we just fast forwarded to peek at a little bit. And then there's also, like, I wanted to practice some of the best ways to get rid of some of this waste material without chipping these doors, because they do get tricky, and this was not not the best way. I needed a sharper razor blade. But after going through the whole process once and making a few mistakes, I think I know what I need to do to clean up and fix my molds to make them work even better. They worked pretty good. I just got a few little things to kind of tidy up. Okay, we're going to leave that here for now. I will be doing some more videos on this process as I go. And again, this isn't necessarily an end-all, be-all. This is how you build acoustic guitars. This is how I am trying to build acoustic guitars. If you're looking to just be successful, there's probably books and other places to go from people that know what they're doing and how to do it. But I'm doing my own little experiment thing, and I hope you enjoy the ride. If you do, you probably got to click the bell to make sure you see all this stuff, because just being subscribed nowadays doesn't seem to mean you're necessarily going to see it. That's about it for this week. I will see you all again soon with updates on this as well as some other projects I have going on. Oh, and I want to also point out, because I've never done this before and people have asked me, and I just did it now for the first time. T-shirts are now available at newperspectivesmusic.com, and I am not using one of those like online T-shirt services. Like, I actually had these made here by a neighborhood screen print shop. They're called Microprint, great guys, and so there's limited sizes for now, and if they sell well, I'll make them again and support my local economy. Thanks a lot, and be good.